decomposed body of a man. He was wearing camouflage overalls, trekking boots, a helmet.
The deepest cave on Earth is called Veryovkina Cave, 7,293 feet or 2.2 kilometers deep. It's approximately the length of 180 school buses lined up bumper to bumper. And without a few terrifying stories, what would the deepest cave be? The Caucasus Mountains stretch along the border between Russia and Georgia. They stand out for several reasons. One big highlight: they house Europe's tallest peak, Mount Elbrus, reaching 18,500 feet. But wait, there's more. To the west, in the region of Abkhazia, lies the Gagra Range. This sub-range of the Caucasus has tall mountains, the tallest one towering over 11,000 feet. Yet, there's something else that makes this area unique. Have you ever heard of the Gagra Range being a limestone paradise? Rivers have sculpted this limestone beauty over time, carving out deep canyons and some of the Earth's largest caves. Mountains boast 4 of the deepest caves in the world. The deepest? Veryovkina Cave, plunging over 7,000 feet deep. To put that into perspective, stack 23 Statue of Liberties. That's how deep we're talking. The cave's entrance sits at an altitude of 7,500 feet. You climb a mountain to find a cave. Once at the top, surrounded by rocky cliffs, you spot a hole. It looks ordinary, but it's far from it. This hole leads over a mile down into the earth. Now think about this for a moment. When explorers first stumbled upon this entrance in 1968, they only reached 377 feet. Fast forward to 1983, and a new team from the Veryovkina Club in Moscow discovers it again. What drives someone to explore these depths? The stories these caves could tell if they could speak. The mystery, the adventure, all there, waiting to be explored. What would you find if you descended into the depths of Veryovkina Cave? I'll tell you in a minute. For 3 years, teams pushed further into Veryovkina Cave, reaching depths of 1,400 feet. But then, everything stopped. The silence of the cave remained undisturbed until the year 2000. What caused this pause remains a mystery. When explorations resumed, it was with renewed vigor. Yet, it wasn't until 2015 that a breakthrough occurred. A new shaft was found, unveiling the cave's vast depths. By 2017, the cave's deepest reaches extended to 7,200 feet. Explorers mapped an extensive network of tunnels spanning over 10 miles. Can you picture the scale of that underground world? Then, in March 2018, the deepest point was reached at an underground lake. This point, where water meets earth, set the cave's depth at 7,257 feet. Let that sink in for a moment. I know what you're probably thinking. Where are the terrifying stories? All right, get this. An epic flood sends Veryovkina cavers scrambling for their lives. In September 2018, the exploration team returned with National Geographic photographers Robbie Schoen and Jeff Wade. The purpose? To document the cave's hidden depths. Under Pavel Demidov's leadership, this team embarked on a mission to explore, document, and study. They aimed to collect samples of possibly undiscovered species and to navigate new horizontal passages. The presence of photographers meant that this time, the world could glimpse the cave's inner sanctum. Even in an ordinary cave, a day's journey requires significant preparation. Climbers need food, gear, and various other essentials. But the logistics aren't different for a cave as deep as Veryovkina. Imagine the planning, the equipment, and the sheer determination needed to venture into the Earth's bowels. Descending into Veryovkina Cave feels like an expedition up a tall mountain. Have you ever seen Mount Everest? Climbers use a multi-camp system. They set up camps at different heights. These camps store food and provide rest. Carrying all your gear at once is impossible in deep caves or on big mountains. Climbers transport loads of equipment in stages for safety. Veryovkina Cave follows the same method. How many camps are inside Veryovkina Cave? 6, at various depths leading to the bottom. Right from the entrance, climbers gear up. They wear unique clothing, harnesses and helmets with headlamps. Then, the descent into darkness begins. They navigated tight tunnels to reach the first camp at 2,000 feet. This camp stays year-round and is ready for emergencies. Think about that, a permanent base deep underground. Robbie, Jeff, and the Veryovkina Club took 4 days to reach Camp 6, which is way down at 6,900 feet. Can you imagine the temperature there? It's just above freezing. The journey can be challenging. They crawl through mud and water. They squeeze through tight spaces. Imagine descending a 100-foot shaft into nothingness. That's the kind of challenge they face. Each step is a test of endurance and bravery. What drives them to keep going through such harsh conditions? The thrill of exploration, perhaps? The desire to uncover the secrets hidden in the depths of the earth? Each descent brings them closer to answers, yet raises more questions. What will they discover in this underground world next? The team relied on thousands of feet of ropes for their descent and ascent. These ropes were their lifeline. Eventually, they reached the flat, sandy expanse of Camp 6. This sizable horizontal tunnel became their base. Here, they would spend the remainder of their expedition. Over the next 3 days, they embarked on their planned tasks. One key mission: to take Robbie and Jeff to the lake at the cave's bottom. The sight that greeted them was breathtaking. Turquoise waters nestled against jet-black limestone walls. The lake stretched 50 feet long and 25 feet wide, plunging to a depth of 28 feet. Without their lights, this vibrant spectacle would remain unseen, shrouded in perpetual darkness. By day 7, things were unfolding smoothly. But then, a change in plans. 2 team members had to leave early for a flight. On their way up to Camp 3, they encountered a deluge. A storm above had triggered a flood pulse, sending torrents of water cascading into the cave. Communication in caves is a challenge. The thick rock layers block wireless signals, so cavers rely on a physical communication line strung through the cave's length. This is how the departing team members sent a warning about the incoming flood pulse. Back at Camp 6, the team received the warning without immediate concern. Flood pulses, they're a known risk in caving. Consider this: a millimeter of rain equals a liter of water per square meter, so a square kilometer can receive 1,000,000 liters from just a millimeter of rainfall. The scale of water movement is hard to grasp. Imagine the volume of water rushing through the cave's passages. The team at Camp 6 had to consider their next steps carefully. Flood pulses might be expected, but they demand respect. How do you stay safe in the face of such unpredictable natural forces? The team's experience and preparation would be put to the test. What strategies would they employ to navigate this challenge? The Veryovkina group, experts in their field, were initially fine. They had a plan: monitor water levels, then act. Smart, right? Then, half an hour after a warning call, they hear something. A faint rumble turns into a roar. It's like a train getting closer. And then, the sound is loud. The cave vibrates like it's an earthquake. Robbie, making breakfast, hears the noise. Everyone rushes out. They shine lights towards the shaft. Water blasts like a fire hose. Robbie freezes, food almost falling. He's less seasoned than the Veryovkina team. The speed and volume of water scare him, but their camp? Still dry. Isn't that a curious twist? How safe are they? What happens next in this dance with nature's fury? The story doesn't end here. There's always more when nature plays its cards. But now, Robbie is trying to stay calm like his Russian comrades. 2 hours in, and the flood's not letting up. The camp's buzz shifts when a team member catches a strange sound, a gurgling from a hole near their tent. He peeks, sees nothing, yet something inside tells him to flag this to Pavel, the team leader. Concern flickers in Pavel's eyes. Together, they decide to assess a nearby siphon. Could the water table be creeping up on them? Back in 5, their eyes dart to the hole. This time, the scene has changed. Water's there, and it's not just trickling, it's rising fast. It slaps the hole's edges, eager to escape its confines. The team member's glance at Robbie is enough. His face is drained of color, a silent alarm bell. The message is clear. It's time to bolt. Noise still dominates, a relentless roar as plans crumble. Panic is not just a word now, it's their reality. Escape plans hastily thrown together. No one dreamed today would turn into a race against nature. Yet, here they are, scrambling. Robbie and Jeff spring into action. Latex suits first, then fleece. They add nylon shells and harnesses to their hasty armor. Robbie's next decision weighs heavy. His camera gear, his treasure trove of equipment worth tens of thousands, stares back at him. A beat skips in his heart. Can he leave it behind? Survival instincts kick in. Gear is replaceable. Lives are not. He salvages what he can. Memory cards. They find refuge in a Ziploc bag and then slip into his suit, a makeshift vault for countless memories captured. It's a small consolation, a whisper of hope amid the turmoil. He announces their plan to start climbing with Jeff. They begin their journey up the vertical shaft, leaving the rapidly flooding Camp 6. It's their final moment with the Russian team at Camp 6. The remaining Perovo team members wait for their leader, Pavel. Robbie and Jeff approach the vertical ropes. They come across a narrow path. It's like a bridge along one wall. Remember the chamber next to the bridge? Before the flood, the vast space was 60 feet deep and 25 feet wide. It's nearly submerged, and the water's edge is close to the bridge. What would you do in such a situation? At the end of the traverse, they find the water's source. Robbie faces the waterfall cascading down the shaft. He clips his ascenders to the rope. He braces himself, takes a deep breath, and begins his ascent. The water pounds on him relentlessly. It's so intense it feels crushing and suffocating. Imagine that pressure, like your head being pushed into your shoulders. Robbie smartly tucks his chin. This move lets the water run off his helmet, creating a tiny breathing space. He keeps his focus on the white rope right before him. He rhythmically moves his ascenders up. Speed is critical here. He finally reaches a small ledge. It's a brief respite from the waterfall. He steps onto it. What does he see as he looks up? He sees that the rope comes out of a shoulder-sized hole in the rocks. But have you ever wondered what could be lurking in that hidden cavern? This hole is also the source of the water, a fire hose of water that takes up the entire space. Can you imagine the sheer force of that torrential flow? He thinks, is there any way I can make it through this intense downpour? But he can't just stop. He's the lead climber. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to forge ahead, even in the face of overwhelming odds? With adrenaline coursing through his veins, he climbs as fast and as high as possible, unaware that this new cave section is primarily dry. Have you ever experienced a moment of clarity amidst chaos? The water flows down a different route to the squeeze, keeping him relatively safe, but can he control his racing heart and mindlessly climbing instincts? He realizes his frantic pace when Jeff urgently yells to slow down. Have you ever been so absorbed in your actions that you lost sight of the bigger picture? He halts, waiting for Jeff to catch up before they continue. Jeff's face is pallid. his eyes wide, and you can't help but wonder, what must he be thinking? But he exclaims in relief that, at least they're alive. Robbie and Jeff eventually make it to Camp 5 at 6,200 feet or 1,890 meters, where they wait, hoping to see the Russians any minute. As the cave shakes around them, do they occasionally look down over the edge into the abyss, questioning what might happen next? Miraculously, down below, what do they see? A single headlamp slowly makes its way up the shaft. When he is finally close enough, who do they realize it is? Andre. After he climbs up into the camp, they ask him if he has seen the others, but he just shakes his head silently. What could be going through their minds as they all sit there, thinking about the worst-case scenario? Down below, as Pavel returns from the siphon, what happens? The bridge that Robbie and Jeff had walked across is completely submerged. The rest of the team must swim to reach the vertical ropes. The last to swim out is Pavel, but what unexpected challenge does he face? The chamber becomes a swirling vortex. What must it have been like for him to go through it? It spins around him, and he has to swim hard to make it to the line. By the time they ascend, what happens to the more profound passages? They are completely submerged in water. Then, when it seemed like all hope was lost, what did they witness 15 minutes after Andre emerged? 5 more lights can be seen making their way up the shaft. One by one, all of the remaining members of the Perovo team make their way up to Camp 5. Robbie watches the ascent out of the flooded passage and can't help but wonder how they managed to stay so strong and capable in such dire circumstances. One team member even carries a stove and 4 sleeping bags attached to his harness. As he observes this, Robbie can't help but reflect on how fortunate he and Jeff were to have gone first, can he? And then, when they climb up into camp, they are quickly in the tent, having coffee and laughing about the entire ordeal. Can you imagine the relief washing over them as they savor that warm cup of coffee? Robbie, on the other hand, is still thoroughly freaked out. He refuses to take off his gear for hours and keeps looking down into the chasm to see if the water is still rising. What would you do in this situation, trapped deep in a rising water cave? 200 feet or 61 meters above them is a horizontal passage they need to pass to move higher into the cave. Usually, it's already half filled with water, and you have to crawl through it. With all of the flooding, it is filled with water. Can you picture the challenge of navigating through that waterlogged passage? As long as the flooding continues, they're trapped and have to hope that the water doesn't continue to rise higher. How would you cope with the uncertainty of their predicament? Pavel reassures Robbie that they will wait until morning to let the water clear. But can they afford to wait that long? And then, over the next 16 hours at the camp, the water roaring slowly dies down. Can you feel the tension easing as the flood subsides? The flood pulse ultimately lasts a total of 20 hours and is the result of a week of rain, followed by a single severe storm. Could anyone have predicted such a relentless onslaught of water? The week of rain has completely saturated the ground, so by the time the storm happens, the water pours relentlessly into Veryovkina cave. How fragile our plans can be in the face of nature's fury. They later learned from a cab driver that the raindrops from the storm are the size of nickels. Imagine the force of those raindrops pounding on the surface. This is a good learning experience for the team. They have previously been operating under the assumption that the cave only floods in winter. How often do we make assumptions that could lead to dangerous situations? Following the expedition, plans are implemented to improve the surface monitoring to watch the rain. How can we better prepare for the unexpected? Another camp is installed in the lower chambers to provide another escape point in the event of flooding. How important is it to have a backup plan in life-threatening situations? And despite this expedition being cut short, they have completed essentially everything they had set out to do. How satisfying it must be to achieve your goals despite adversity. New passages have been explored and mapped, cave species have been sampled, and although the camera equipment is destroyed, all of the pictures are preserved. How can we find silver linings in the darkest of clouds? Amidst the challenges faced during their daring escape, it's important to remember that Veryovkina Cave is not only a place of danger, but also a sanctuary for unique and remarkable life forms. The cave is home to at least 15 species of invertebrates, although it's highly likely that even more remain undiscovered in this remote underground environment. Among these extraordinary creatures is a sponge from the Dino genus, an endemic species that call only Arabica massif's deepest caves its home. These invertebrates have adapted to thrive in the cave's complete darkness, showcasing life's resilience in extreme conditions. Furthermore, the cave's biodiversity includes pseudoscorpions, amphipods resembling shrimp-like crustaceans, daddy longlegs, also known as harvestmen or spider crabs, spiders, and ticks. Remarkably, these species are found exclusively in select caves within the vicinity, emphasizing this underground ecosystem's unique and fragile nature. One particularly remarkable resident of Veryovkina Cave is the shrimp Siphocardanella demidovi, a species discovered nowhere else but within the depths of this cave. This shrimp is precisely located at the deepest point of Nemo Lake, aptly named the Last Camp. It's worth noting that this species was named in honor of Pavel Demidov. Remember him? He was the dedicated researcher of Veryovkina Cave who tragically lost his life in 2020 while exploring another cave nearby. Going back to Veryovkina Cave in November of the same year, 2020. Some people discovered a rope fixed at the cave's entrance. How did that rope get there? This is typically a big no-no in the caving world because anyone can access the cave and potentially get hurt or lost if unprepared. Have you ever encountered a situation where someone's actions put others at risk? 8 months later, on August 4th, 2021, the same Perovo team returned to continue their work in Veryovkina Cave. What drives them to return to such a treacherous place? They descend into the cave as they did 3 years earlier, but then at 1,300 feet, 396 meters, they find a pair of crampons and an ice axe. What are these tools doing so deep within the cave? This doesn't make sense. This equipment can't have just fallen into the cave from the entrance. There are no straight drops to where this equipment was found. Who could have ventured so far into the cave with this gear? This means that someone must have come into and deep into the cave. What kind of person would venture into such an arduous journey? They continue further in, all the way to the permanent camp at 2,000 feet or 610 meters. Then we went to the second camp at 3,200 feet or 975 meters. Then at 3,600 feet or 1,097 meters. How deep into the earth are they willing to go? Halfway into the deepest cave on Earth, they find the badly decomposed body of a man. What could have led this individual so deep into the cave? He is wearing camouflage overalls, tracking boots, and a helmet. He has 2 cell phones and is still attached to the rope he had used to descend into the cave. What could have been his story, and what mysteries lie hidden in Veryovkina Cave? Based on the decomposition, it appears that he has been there for months. Although he had no ID when he was found, authorities identified the man as 37-year-old Sergei Kozeyev using a missing persons database. But what led Sergei to this remote location, and what happened to him? Using the information from the cell phones found on him, they figure out what has happened that leads to his death. Sergei lives in Sochi, Russia, just east of the Russian border with Georgia, and about 2 hours from the entrance to Veryovkina Cave. He is an avid outdoorsman who travels solo expeditions to explore the wilderness. On November 1st, 2020, he said goodbye to his family, as he always does when he goes on one of these solo expeditions, and then set off for the Gagra Mountains. He also needs to tell them where he is going, although he is heading to a location that fewer people have set foot in than the International Space Station. Based on the documents and screenshots on his phone, Sergei has spent almost a year planning this trip. He has printed out maps and materials from the expeditions made by the Veryovkina team precisely to navigate down into the cave. First, he makes the ascent into the mountains to the cave entrance using his crampons and ice axe. Then, he fixes a rope to the opening and descends into the darkness of Veryovkina cave. Using the information he has gathered from the Veryovkina team, he hauls all his equipment in 3 transport bags through the tunnels and narrow passages. Then, he travels down the massive vertical shafts alone using a lattice descender. He successfully makes it to the first camp, leaves some of the equipment later discovered by the Veryovkina team, and proceeds almost directly to the second camp. The excrement found on site indicates that he lived at the second camp for about a week before descending further into the cave. From the second camp, things get more challenging. Beyond that camp are some more significant and more technically challenging vertical shafts. In addition, the cave becomes significantly wetter from that point onward. You might wonder what drove him to push the boundaries of human exploration in a place few dare to tread. As any caver knows, proper equipment proves crucial. But what happens when even the best gear can't save you? The standard fleece underlayer with a waterproof outer layer proves essential for surviving the cold and wet underground environment. It remains unclear what happens in Sergei's last moment, but he realizes that he cannot descend any further through the water with the equipment he possesses. At this point, he attempts to make his way back up the cave, but due to his prior descent into a technically challenging area, he cannot escape. Sergei brings ascenders for his hands, but needs more stirrups for his feet, leaving him without any footholds for the long, vertical shafts. He must try repeatedly to exit the cave, but how many attempts will it take to escape this relentless maze? Exhaustion and cold eventually lead him to lie down for one final sleep, from which he never awakens. Upon discovering his body, the rescue team ascends to the surface and notifies authorities. How do you extract a man from the bowels of the earth when the earth itself resists? Given the cave's difficulty and the depth at which Sergei's body is found, it takes a team of over 100 individuals to retrieve it eventually. Being in a confined space like a cave with a decomposing body poses particular risks, as the gas emitted from the decomposition process can accumulate and become toxic at elevated levels. Despite the involvement of numerous individuals in the rescue effort, they ultimately have to disassemble Sergei's body to extract him from the cave successfully. After retrieval, his body is finally returned to his wife and children in Sochi. Currently, Veryovkina Cave holds the title of the deepest cave on Earth. However, the Earth is vast, and caves are less readily visible than mountains. Veryovkina Cave earned the distinction of being the deepest in 2018. It remains uncertain whether it will maintain its status as the deepest cave on Earth. Still, in 2023, the depth was extended further when a Russian caving club used an underwater drone to reach an incredible 7,293 feet, the equivalent of nearly 6 Empire State Buildings stacked on top of one another. Are you curious to witness the wonders and challenges of other caves? Click and watch this video now for a captivating journey into the Earth's deepest abyss.